Now, did you think at that time when you found out you were pregnant, this might not be the place to raise children?
You know, I think we were so caught up in the adrenaline of being there and what was going on around us that I don't think I had time to really think. I don't think, also, I hadn't been a mother at that point, so I was just pregnant, and you're sort of, there's heady moments when you just find out you're pregnant where you feel just, I don't know, for me, I've always loved being pregnant. It's very, all the hormones are racing, and it's a happy time. And so I just sort of floated through that period and didn't really think of what it would be like raising kids in that environment. Now, that being said, there were a lot of Israelis and a lot of Palestinians raising kids in that environment, and they were all doing fine. I mean, it was a tough time, and it was very hard to explain to family members that we could be very close to the action, if you will, or trouble spots, and yet we felt the kids were very secure at home because they were young enough that you could kind of sequester them in at our house or at friends' houses or in yards, and you took certain precautions. You didn't go on buses. You didn't take them to grocery stores. You didn't go stand in line at the movies, at malls. I remember when the kids got a little older and they started understanding some Hebrew because they went to a Hebrew preschool. They would understand at the mall when the security guard would ask if we had any weapons, and they would sort of mimic that. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it is starting to get to be time to move on. Their awareness, they weren't that aware when we were there, and so it was easy to kind of cocoon them, and you almost felt like you could separate the two lives that you were leading. And I think in a way, having kids in that environment humanized the situation. A lot of journalists, a lot of foreign journalists, I think, didn't last very long in Israel. They could maybe stay 3 years, but they were burnt out at the end of the 3 years because it was such an intense conflict. I think having kids there softened the experience for us, it just allowed us perspective on what was going on, what was important. I did a lot of some of my favorite stories were there because as a mother I could relate to other mothers, and there were a lot of teary stories, but at the same time it gave me this extra ability to tell those stories, and so I really think it. No, I did. I guess back to your original question, did I think should we be raising kids there? What was deceptive about Jerusalem and Israel at the time is it could look so normal, and then the normalcy could be broken by a really horrific event. But it was the normalcy that we focused on, and we got by like so many other people there. I mean, I also think that when a war evolves around you when you're living in a city, and I often ask my friends who lived through Beirut during the worst days of the Civil War how they raised kids there and had a normal life, if you will. And I think when the war evolves as you're there, it doesn't all come at once. It sort of, things break out and you start adjusting your behavior, and you start thinking that you can control the situation or that you can make choices that are safe. And maybe maybe you're deceiving yourself, but it's a kind of survival mechanism that people who do live in war zones, and many people do, get by. And so I think we had that kind of survival mechanism because we knew the streets, we knew where things were happening, and we knew how to kind of adjust as the conflict was evolving. What was scarier to me was when, at the end, when we did finally decide to call it quits in Jerusalem after 7.5 years, and after we'd had an unpleasant kidnapping incident in Gaza. And we just sort of had said, it's kind of time to go. What was unnerving to me was then my first assignment as the Pentagon correspondent was to go to Baghdad, and that was a conflict that I had not covered. I used to go to Iraq before the war, but I hadn't covered the war as it evolved there, and so I didn't know. It was very unnerving to drop into a war that was already really in full force. And I didn't feel like I had that sixth sense that I had from living in Israel, knowing how to avoid certain things, or when I took a chance, I would go into it head on, but I had my antenna up and I knew the dangers. It was really much harder to go into Baghdad because I just didn't know, I didn't know the scene, and I didn't have that sixth sense that I would describe, you know, what sort of evolved as we were covering things in Jerusalem. So the kids, I never felt the kids were in danger. I think I would be an irresponsible mother if I had thought that I was taking a chance with them. I wasn't taking a chance with them. It was incredible how close we were. The proximity in terms of where things were happening was pretty stunning. And there were times looking backwards that yeah, we were in situations that were risky, you know, to our personal safety, but not to the children's safety. The children were always in a very secure environment, I felt.